Next, we continue data processing. At this time, we are going to calculate our risk index value. And then we're going to try and massage this risk index value in a way that we can actually meaningfully utilize it. So first is the risk index we calculate as the the ratio of fatal accidents per year to the number of vehicles registered for a country, and we'll multiply that by a figure of 100. So we are trying to get a basically percentage figure. Now, examination of this data shows that risk index ranges from 0 for a country like San Marino to 13.5 for Central African. However, the median is around 0.1%. So this is going to be a challenge to basically try and use this kind of information to plot. So we are going to first of all divide all of these countries into different bins as we spoke about. So the next formula that you see over here basically just does that. We use the column of the risk index here, and then if find out if it is less than 0.2, then we assign this one value which corresponds to low risk country. And then if we see if it's between 0.2 to 0.4, then we assign 2, which is low medium, and so on. Then we have 0.8 and 1, and then finally anything greater than 2 will be assigned a risk index of 6, which is very high risk. We then create a new column to assign a color to each of these risk categories, because we're going to use that color in our mapping, and the color we're going to format using the WebGuiR feature, which is violet is the lowest risk versus green is a moderate risk versus red, which is very high risk. And that once we do that, and basically applying these formulas and creating these new columns, we have created our sheet that we can pretty much utilize. So you see over here risk category color, and then the risk category value. So in this case, if you see the risk index was 0.84, which corresponds to a category of 4. So it's because it is greater than 0.8 over here, so it corresponds to 4. And now we get to the source code. The first part of the source code is going to be the world map visualization program. So what we see here is that world map visualization is based on the bubbles format available at GitHub as shown here. We need to include a few .js libraries here. First is the minified version of D3, and then we have the top OJSON that is also necessary for parts of displaying the topography, and then we have the data maps itself. That's the library that we need to include. Now, next to that is we basically describe what a data map structure is. It requires a container definition, and the container definition is provided as shown over here. The basic map structure is created by a simple call to the data maps object. So, we just create a new object called map, and then we assign the data map structure to it. And the data map object requires some parameters to be specified. So scope, which is a geographical area, in our case will be the world. The projection, what kind of map projection we want. So we'll use the standard Mercator projection. The height of the map, so we'll set it about 600 pixels, and the element that is where the map is displayed. So in this case, the container that we defined above. And finally, fills. The fills are the colors for the different different areas of the bubbles that'll display the countries that we're talking about. So from a risk profile perspective, if you want the red color for high risk country, then those colors we define using these fills. And the next step is define the map bubbles that pop up displaying the risk profile for each country. So we use the first, in this case, we go back to Excel sheet, and then we use a nice long formula to create the list of definitions for each of these countries that we are going to basically copy paste from Excel and put it into the source code. So we concatenate the name, and then where the name is actually the name of the country, and then we concatenate what the auto insurance risk level is, and whether it's low or low moderate or whatever. And then we put in the latitude and longitude information. We put in the radius of the bubble. The radius of the bubble is basically multiply, uses the risk profile as well. So for low risk, we have smaller radius. For high risk, we have bigger bubbles. And then the color, so that we just defined earlier. So the output of that column in XLS looks something like this: name Afghanistan, then the life expectancy, which we're not using, and then followed by the auto insurance risk, which is whether it's high, moderate, or in this case it's high moderate, then the latitude, longitude of Kabul, and then the radius of the circle of the bubble, and then the fill key, which in this case will be yellow. The fields here are definitions of parameters of risk profile bubble for each country. Then uh, this is simply just copy pasted into this map.bubbles function that we will show in a little bit. And then finally we add this following code snippet to get the on hover functionality, so if you hover on over Afghanistan, for example, then it'll pop up with all of the information related to Afghanistan, and lo, it's ready to publish. Next, we'll talk about the bubble map visualization source code. The bubble map visualization program is based on a format that is actually created by Mike Bostock, and it's available in this link as shown. This one actually just uses the D3 library, and basically we can just fly with it. Now, what I've done in this program is, instead of copy pasting like we did with Excel in the previous one, we are going to use JSON data objects. So basically, because that's the way it really works, is uses data files. So in this case, we'll use JSON. Now, in order to create this JSON data using the MS Excel sheet that we created earlier, we follow the following steps. First is we save the worksheet with all of the data columns in a tab delimited format, TSV from MS Excel. You could also use CSV. I prefer TSV just because, to avoid confusions related to commas within data. Then you can visit this site, or which is the convertcsv.com. They allow you to freely input any text format data and then convert it into a JSON file. So we'll do that, and a couple of tweaks are necessary before we can use this file. First, we have to save the output JSON into our local machine, and after that we need to open that. We could use Notepad++. I like that editor. It's fairly universal in its appeal. And so the tweaks that we need to make in this file are, we need to add, that's before it can be utilized in our source code, is we need to add this particular piece of code, which is we are embedding all of the data into an overarching structure called country, with the scope as world, and its children being the objects that are the individual countries. Why we need to do this is because the feature that we are going to utilize to create the bubble map is the pack architecture, and pack requires there to be a parent-child relationship, at least one level. This file is now ready to be read by the source code. The definitions that we have to set up first within the code are the diameter of the canvas on which we are going to display the bubble chart, and then the bubble pack definition that I just spoke about, and finally the SVG class definitions. Once these definitions are done, the JSON is read within the code using commands something similar to d3.json as shown over here. And then so for each record that is read by the JSON, we apply the following features. First is we apply the mouse over title definition, including the country name and risk category. Then we specify the radius of the bubble, like we did for the previous project. Higher the risk, the bigger the bubble. And the fill color definition, again, higher risk, the redder the shade. By redder, I mean from the WebGAR scale. And then the opacity of the bubble, that is the higher the risk, the higher is the opacity. So it shows up brighter. And then finally, we are ready to publish. Publishing the site. Now, this is a fairly straightforward process. What we need is to set up an architecture on our local machines, and I've used XAMPP, a WAMP implementation, and we'll go through the steps here. Uh, so first we download XAMPP and then open it. The installation is fairly straightforward, and we will have to specify a particular folder where XAMPP is installed. I have installed it directly into my C drive, and I would recommend you doing that as well if you don't already have XAMPP on your machine. Then we and also this location here will provide the XAMPP that you can download and install. When the installation is complete and we should see a directory structure or something like this. So in the C drive, for example, the way I have set it up. Then within that, htdocs is the root of the web server on the local machine. So within that, we'll create a couple of directories. FB for final project. That's the convention I'm using. And then there's two additional directories that I created: data and lib. So within data, I'm going to put the JSON file that I created in the previous step. And within the lib, I'm going to put in all of my libraries, all the 2 or 3 libraries that we mentioned during our source code discussion. And once those are copied over, then we move the source codes with the HTML files into the FB folder. And at this time, our setup is complete. Now we need to start the web server. For this, we do start all programs XAMPP, and within that XAMPP control panel. The control panel show a bunch of different options for all of the softwares that come with XAMPP, which is the MySQL or PHP, etc. So what we'll do is just start the Apache web server. Once you start this web server, you should see a port number over there, a port for the standard HTTP protocol and the HTTPS protocol. There's one starting with the 80 will be a standard one, so we need to note that down. So in my case, it was 8081. And then I basically, once Apache started, I'm ready to go. All I have to do is call this HTTP and then HTTP localhost, and then specify the path name for my file, and I'm good to go. All right, now that we've set it all up, it is the moment of truth. So if we got all our setup right and our code right and our data right, and if we execute our programs on the browser, we should see something like this: the two programs. The one at the top is the bubble map, and the one at the bottom is the world chart with the risk profiles. So before we execute, first let us reconfirm our settings. As you can see, the XAMPP control in the XAMPP control panel, Apache is running, and the port here is 8081. That's the one that we'll use in the browser. Now we go to the browser, localhost 8081, and then the first program we're going to call is worldmap.html. So we execute it, and voila, we see it here. So the world map, is all in all its glory. So when we hover over some of these countries, what we see is their risk profiles and and whether they are high or moderate or low. So in this case, in Afghanistan, we see the risk profile as high moderate. Then we go to United States. Here we see it is low, and so on. Now the next program that we wrote, we called it as bubbles.html. So let's bring that up. There it is, bubbles.html, and we enter, and there you go. We see that the bubbles have been published here, and likewise you see the different color coding, and hovering over these bubbles we see their risk profile or risk category. In this case, very high. In case of Colombia, it's low. And in case of India, it's low medium. So that's basically how it is. And with this, I hope that you found this presentation both enjoyable and entertaining, and also something that you learned from there. And do let me know what you feel about it. Appreciate any comments. Thank you and goodbye.